Welcome to Alumni Connections. Thank you so much for joining me, whether you're live or catching the recorded. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really want you to help support soundbusiness.org. I really want to connect you to other alumni. Today, we have Lei Brutus. I am so excited to talk to her. She's an amazing student. We're going to get into the Alumni Connections theme here, and then I will introduce her properly.
This is the Alumni Connections Project. We all know Randolph is better than the rest. Even when you progress, you still gotta rep. Philip Randolph Campus High School. But this is not a test, you should say it with your chest. Be proud of your origin, and if you are proud, support it then. Stronger together through unity, better together. Let's build the community. Randolph isn't a school or a building, it's a legacy. It's not in your past, it's your identity. So show some pride. Alumni Connections is sponsored and brought to you by SBI, CCPI. Soundbusiness.org. Soundbusiness.org. The journey doesn't end with graduation and prom. The journey doesn't end with graduation and prom. The journey doesn't end with the journey doesn't end. This is the Alumni Connections Project. This is the Alumni Connections Project. Philip Randolph. Philip Randolph.
Not too bad, right?
Nice intro song.
So I want to introduce everybody to Lei S. Brutus is a second-year JD candidate, the University of Pennsylvania Law School, Penn Law. At Penn Law, Lei is the president of the Black Law Students Association and an associate editor for the University of Pennsylvania Law Review. Big. Prior to Penn Law, Lei worked as a community educator at the NYC Mayor's Office to end gender-based violence. Lei is an alumna of Williams College, where she majored in economics and psychology. In her free time, which I'm sure you have so much of, Lei enjoys boxing, reading, and traveling. Thanks so much for joining me and doing this for me.
Thank you for having me, Cameron. I'm excited to be here.
That's awesome. All right, so we got that very, very amazing short bio, but you're at law school. Kind of tell us what you're doing right now, what's going on in your life, what's making up the time on a daily basis. I'm sure a bit of virtual going on in the COVID environment, but what is happening in your life right now, and then we'll kind of get into the Randolph experience and how you've gotten up to this point.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I'm in my second year at law school, so that means a lot of reading. So most of my time actually is spent reading, just preparing for classes, and then running different organizations that I'm on and extracurricular. So yeah, it's literally a lot of reading. But I still have time to, separate my life from the law school, because I learned my first year that was something that helped me do well in classes. So.
Right. Are you working outside of classes, or is it all just classes?
It's all classes. You're not permitted to work outside, like outside of the law school on a full-time or part-time basis.
That's interesting. So why do they have that rule in place?
I think it has to do with just how rigorous the program is. We're taking a lot of credits, and sometimes we're doing clinics, which are hands-on practice with people who are seeking legal representation. So because of the rigor of the program, they think working would distract from that.
How does that play into the economics of? I don't want to get too deep into it, but just is that something that you plan out before? You just know that going in, or is that something that's very challenging?
Yeah, so that's something you can plan for, because when you're applying to these schools, most of them will let you know whether students are allowed to work, and if so, there's usually a cap, right? Like 2 hours or 10 hours a week, or something of that nature. So basically, not substantial work.
I gotta imagine there's a benefit to knowing I'm just full-time school. I can focus. I don't have to worry about this element.
For sure. But at the same time, you can understand the financial strain on certain students if you can't work while you're in school.
Yeah,
so
it sets some barriers there, right? Because if you can't manage it financially, you got some other things weighing on you.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So let's get into the Randolph experience, and we'll work our way back here. So let's go rewind all the way back to junior high. Where were you living? Where were we going to junior high, and how did Randolph first come on to your radar?
Yeah, so I did junior high at MS 61 in Brooklyn, New York. And like every middle schooler, we got that huge like book of high schools around the city. And I was just looking through to see which schools had great math and science programs, because at that time, those were the topics I was most interested in. And they used to tell you things like, you need at least an 85 to get into the school. And as someone whose mom lived in Brooklyn, I wanted to go to a school that was not in Brooklyn.
Okay.
So I tried to.
I was going to ask, like, what was the reason behind the commute?
That's where Harlem came in. I was like, okay, it's far enough. It's not too close to home. So yeah, so that's how it landed on Randolph. So based on that big book of schools and location.
And so what was your first actual interaction with Randolph? How did that go?
My first interaction was picking up our ID cards and schedule like a couple of days before freshman year. And I just remember having to transfer on so many trains just to get to campus. I was just like, okay, maybe I made a mistake by the car.
I gotta say, like, commuting to school or to work or anything is one of those things, like, if you can avoid it.
Yeah, I think it was during rush hour. It might have been like an hour and a half from my house to get to Randolph.
And I remember having so many conversations with students about, all right, so how many hours are you sleeping? What time? I was always surprised at like the times that people were waking up at like 5 a.m. in the morning to get to school.
Yeah, depending on your schedule. But yeah, when I had first period class, I had to be up at 5:30, try to get out the house at 6:30 to make it.
That's wild. That's high school, right?
I can't do that right now. I can't be up at 5:30. Like, what is
everybody gets their different patterns. I've been trying to adjust because as we got into fall, like, it's been darker in the mornings, but during the summer, I was up every day about 4:30 a.m. in the morning. But I haven't been doing that lately. We go through cycles. So your first interaction, you're commuting to school. So what did that first semester of Randolph look like? What were you enjoying? What were you into? What was not so great?
Yeah, so I feel like first semester was kind of a blur, or maybe the whole first year was kind of a blur.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I did have a lot of trouble with, and that I still remember till this day, was getting into the correct classes. And I'm sure a lot of people can co-sign this. So my middle school let you take certain regents in middle school, which meant that when I got my schedule, there were things like algebra or living environment. And I was like, wait, I did these already. And it took maybe a month to try to get into the correct classes. So that's one thing I definitely remember from first semester and first year in general. And it was just a brand new environment, being around people you haven't been around before, making new friends. Yeah, so it was a lot.
So tell me about you're in this environment, you're making friends, you're up in Harlem, right? You're not in Brooklyn. So was there folks that you had been in school with in middle school actually at Randolph, or was there nobody?
There was no one. No one from my middle school ever came to a school like Randolph.
That's wild. So yeah. You're at Randolph, all new friends and everything. You're finishing up freshman year. You're moving into sophomore year. What's that like?
Yeah, I think sophomore year also, like, almost everything about high school except for the last year was a blur. But sophomore year is much better. You have your group of friends. You're happy about your schedule for the most part. And it's just a matter of, learning and just enjoying high school. I joined a couple teams. I think at that point I was on the track team. I did a lot of extracurriculars at Randolph.
What pushed you to be in so many extracurriculars?
I just wanted like another way to have fun, I guess. Because I think, sports and dancing just makes school in general fun. And it's another way to bond with other students as well. So I was interested in track. My sister ran track. So I was like, okay, maybe I'll try it. I did it for sophomore year. And then I was like, okay, no, not totally my cup of tea. But then I found volleyball, and I stayed with that from sophomore year till senior year. So I really enjoyed volleyball.
Yeah, and I don't know that, you know, people can notice this from you sitting down being on the camera, but you are on the tall side, right?
5'10", yes.
All right, so I remember that being something that was very unique about you in terms of like your sports and just your presence walking around school. I remember that about Lei, that she was a presence when she was coming through the hallway and coming into the program. Talk to us about your first exposure to CCPI and your, you know, I don't know if you participated in any other college programs inside or outside of school, but I think that's always interesting because one of the things that, and I was asking about the extracurricular stuff because, and I noticed that you have another older sister, so I don't know if there was advice on, you know, putting the high school resume together and the fact that colleges look at more than just grades. I also love, and I'm throwing a lot at you here, but I also know you were doing well in high school in terms of grades. So I'm wondering, what is your advice to kind of be consistently doing well on the grades? So many people in high school, you know, maybe they fooled around freshman year or sophomore year, and then they're struggling to catch up. How did you stay consistent? Why did you participate in all these curriculars? And what were some of the other programs that you were doing on the academic and college side?
Yeah, so that's a chunk full, but I'll try to hit every point and just remind me if I've missed one of them. So I had an older sister who went through that process 3 years before me, and ended up at Toth University. So I knew that, you know, you had to get good grades in high school, but also have extracurricular on your resume, which pushed me to do some things, but not everything that I did. I was just interested in those extracurriculars, like honestly, just interested in like track, volleyball, step team, Desi dance team. And yeah, I did a lot of these activities with my friends. So it was, as much as it was, you know, a resume builder, it was also just social activity with friends. Every single team I was on, I had a friend on. So that, and doing well.
So who ended up dragging you on to these teams? Who do we owe? Who do we blame? Who do we owe credit to?
Yeah, so volleyball. I think 3 of us just ended up being interested and wanted to try it on. So Shanice and Ciasia were both on the volleyball team with me. Same with track. Same group of girls were also on track with me. Swimming, I did by myself, and I stopped it after a semester because the chlorine wasn't working well with my skin. So I stopped that. I dragged one of my friends to audition for the Sistas Only step team. I'd always been interested, but I never stepped before. So I just thought I was going to be bad. And I didn't try out for Sistas Only until my senior year. Even though I had a lot of friends like the year above me who were part of Sistas Only. So like the captain, co-captains, they were all part of it. And when they came back to see the show, they're like, "You're in Sistas Only? Wow." Yeah, I think it was just
you definitely kept people guessing, right?
Yeah. So yeah, it was a lot of like high school's ending, and I don't want to leave with any regrets, right? So I was like, let me try out. The worst that can happen is they tell me no, and I keep going as I was going. So
I gotta say, I think your take on it is probably very refreshing, because I just think about, you know, there's a lot of students that are involved, they're getting one thing, but I think, you know, a happier person is somebody that tries a few different things, and you are tasting and really seeing what you liked. And I'm sure that, you know, we'll hear that again as you start talking about the college experience, because I'm sure you continued it, especially from what I've read on LinkedIn and from what you've talked about. So that kind of thing, you know, if you're a young person, you know, being, you know, open to learning. I know that's one of the points that you were wanting people to walk away with today, but being open and jumping on a team, maybe you won't be great, but you'll learn and you'll find out, right?
Yeah, at the very least, you find out what's not for you, and that's
exactly. And that can be as good as learning as finding something that you like, right? You know, I definitely don't like that. All right, I'm staying away from that from now on.
Yeah.
Talk to us about junior year. You're getting prepared for the departure from high school? What does that look like, and what's going through your head with college applications and getting prepared? How are you making a decision on what schools to apply to? What was interesting you? What was calling out to you?
Yeah, so junior year, as I think a lot of people can attest to, is just the pressures just increased exponentially from sophomore year. So I tried to get into as many AP classes as I was interested in, because again, that's a thing that colleges looked at. Thinking about SAT scores, so you mentioned CCPI before. I think I did 1 or 2 classes with there was a Kaplan course inside the school itself. I think I did 1 or 2 classes, and I was not a fan of it. And then I ended up finding out about Urban Scholars that was running inside City College, and City College just across the street. So a good chunk of my friends, actually, I think it was like 10 of us, signed up for the SAT prep at Urban Scholars within City College. Really like that program, and I think
tell me why you like that over, because I know one of the big things, and one of my claims to fame in terms of working with SBI was actually putting on the Cassie program in 2010 and 11, and data tracking and chasing down everybody on scores and all that kind of stuff, which I'm certainly proud of. But one of the things that I've found most interesting about doing some of these interviews, is talking to folks and understanding some different programs, which for whatever reason, I don't know if people are like timid and like, oh, well, I chose this program over here, so I don't want to diss them by telling them about. Meanwhile, I don't know in terms of like what Thompson is about, but for me in particular, it's like, we just want you to get good grades and have as many opportunities and doors open as possible. I don't care where you get the grade from. I don't care where you get the access to the opportunity from. Just get it. So it's been really nice to hear about, I think, hopefully I don't mess this up, but like a Kosua who went over to Harlem Children's Zone, and there was a really great program over there for writing for her that she took advantage of. Mm-hmm. So, there are more resources. Randolph, I think, is a great school because there's so many resources within that building. I went to a smaller high school, and really there was some resources there, but if you wanted opportunity, you were going to have to really go outside of the building to find something that was going to help you. Randolph is somewhat unique in that it's a larger school, and there are many resources inside the building, but it's so cool that hearing about all the resources. You're in New York City. There are so many different resources, and you're taking advantage of one that's literally across the street from A. Philip Randolph at City College, Urban Scholars. So tell me a little bit about that program and what was the beneficial things and what you liked about it.
Yeah, so just on a surface level, the difference I found between the Kaplan and the Urban Scholars program was just cost. So Urban Scholars was a free program, and Kaplan, I don't remember what you had to pay for it, but I remember you had to pay for it. But either way,
we were charging somewhere around $379, which was our way of looking at it was twofold. One, students and parents commit more when there's skin in the game. So like if we offer something completely for free, people are going to value it less. And then the other side of it was we didn't have funding to do it. So it was like, all right, we got a great deal with what we set up, but certainly, it wasn't for everybody. We were able to help some people that, were challenged, but we had to pay for it somehow. But that skin in the game thing, sometimes paying $379 gives you that level of accountability that wouldn't be there for free. For somebody like yourself, which I don't know if you can testify to this, but there are some people that can self-direct and self-focus, but that's not everybody.
Yeah, no, I definitely understand the funding thing you mentioned, and skin in the game as well. But I just wanted to have a great SAT score, so I didn't really care about the pricing, but I did go to a couple of classes, like I said, did the diagnostic. And the learning environment just wasn't conducive to my learning. So a lot of it would just not, or like glance over why certain answers were wrong.
Mhm.
So like, even if I got something right, I still want to know why A, B, C, and D were wrong, right? Even if the answer choice is E, I still want to know why. So like, let's say this question wasn't a fluke and I actually understand the material. And that's one of the things I got from the Urban Scholars Program. And even though it was free, I think just, again, I said like 10 of us, around 10 of us did that program together. I think it also became like a group accountability thing.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
I'm saying, well, you weren't at Urban Scholars on Wednesday, like what's going on? You know, just checking in with your friends to make sure, you know, everyone's trying to do the best they can to get their scores up and apply to schools, and most importantly, get financial aid from these schools because of your scores.
I think that's so important too. And so many programs are built around that. And our program, Sound Business, is built around that in terms of bringing the performing arts groups together. That kind of hooks everybody in. And then, okay, you got to maintain a certain GPA to stay in here. So there's that positive peer pressure. So I love that you built that on your own with your friends, to sort of stay accountable to each other. That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So you did this program. You got a great SAT score, I'm imagining, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I easy score.
And then what was the decision making around where you were applying and where you wanted to go?
Yeah, so I think SBI actually played a very big role in the types of schools I wanted to apply to. Just going into high school, even sophomore year, I just had heard about all these Ivy League schools, and I was just like, okay, maybe that's something I'm interested in. You know, the University of Pennsylvania's, Browns, Harvard's, etc. And then I remember Thompson talking about the benefits of small liberal arts colleges, where you can get essentially the same education, but the school's so small that you also get that individualized attention, right? You're not just a number in the classroom. Professors know your name. You can email them. You can set up office hours at your convenience, basically. So I think that shaped a lot of my thoughts about which schools to apply to, and I ended up applying to basically only small liberal arts colleges.
Okay. And when you were applying, what was your process for sort of reviewing each school and deciding, you know, this is a place that I really want to go, or this is like not so much?
Yeah, so for me, I looked a lot at majors. Even if it's like I want, at that time, junior year, I was interested in, you know, the medical field, but still wanting to explore things like economics or psychology. So I looked at, you know, whether that would be feasible at these schools, right? Do they just have an economics program or just a pre-med program? And some schools only allow you to have a major in like biology or chemistry to be in the pre-med program. So I looked at schools that would allow me to do both, essentially, if I wanted to do that. Location was the thing as well. I wanted to get that, you know, living away college campus experience without being too far from home.
Did I hear correctly? You were still considering at that time, like a medical career and that sort of thing?
Yeah. For a long time.
So what, and I may be kind of, sort of getting too far in my head itself and the story, but I'll wait on that. So you're deciding, you're thinking you're going medical track. So you're applying to the schools. What made you finally land on Williams? What were some of the other schools that you got into, and what made Williams the place you wanted to go?
Yeah, so I did the Quest for Scholarship, and how that works is you basically apply early decision to a handful of schools, and they're at your choosing. An early decision means you get in, and it's a binding contract. So I put my application in for Williams, Swarthmore, Amherst, and Haverford. I think and Middlebury were the 5 schools that I put my application with. And the way it would work is you have a ranking, and they would only send your application to the following ranking school if you didn't get into the first one. So I ranked Williams as my first school, so I don't know if I would have ever gotten into the others, but I ranked Williams as my first school. They accepted me, and that was that. So I couldn't really speak to other schools that I got into, but the schools I was considering.
And why was Williams like pinpoint top of the pile?
Yeah, so just, I guess, ranking wise, Williams was like the #1 small liberal arts college. They had a really strong econ program. And again, by that time I was really interested in economics. So I was like, okay, I can do that, and I can still pursue a pre-med track if that's what I want, or completely pivot and do psychology, which I ended up doing. And location, it was very secluded, and it's kind of weird to say, oh, that's a reason, but I knew I would never live in a place like that. So the best way to get that experience would be the 4 years of undergrad, where I knew I'd come back to New York after it, because I would never live in Williamstown.
And we talk about that too, right? Just getting that different experience, not you grew up in the city, so let's get you out. And I love that. And I love that about your story, that you're tasting and all that. So you get into Williams. Did you visit Williams before all this went down in terms of like making your final application and final decision?
Yeah, so I didn't get to visit because the program didn't do visits to Williams, but I did like a virtual tour. I called admissions and spoke to a couple people. They put me in contact with other Black students, and I was able to have like a quick phone call with a couple either alum or current students. And I felt like that was enough for me to make my decision, but I also understand the importance of visiting a school, which I did when I was applying to law school. So
that's awesome. Yeah. I love that you mentioned like talking specifically with Black students because I know, this is something that is a major part of, you're going someplace, spend 4 years, like, is this a cultural fit? Is this a place that's going to welcome me? Am I going to feel completely out of place? So once you got accepted, summer, you're getting ready to go away, butterflies in the stomach, I can imagine, right? What was that first experience like being on Williams campus? What was the culture like? What did it live up to the conversations that you had on the phone, or was there a culture shock?
Yeah, I mean, it lived up to the conversations I had on the phone. Everyone told me, it's very beautiful, mountains everywhere. Like, I saw cows in real life for the first time. So that's how secluded the campus was. But it was still a culture shock as someone who, migrated to Brooklyn from Haiti, lived basically all their lives in New York City, and was used to seeing a lot of diversity, but that wasn't the case at Williams. It's just, yeah, it was diversity was not like a big thing at Williams. So yeah, it still ended up being a culture shock. I ended up doing, they let you do certain trips in like orientation, and I ended up doing this hiking trip. Again, new experiences, never hiked before. So I got to.
I can't imagine hiking the first time in college. I'm trying to think what that would feel like. You're sweating. You probably never sweated before.
Yeah, they gave us a list of things to pack, but it was still like hiking boots are recommended but not required. So I didn't get hiking boots just because the expense, but also I didn't know if I would like it again. Was not a big fan of hiking, but I did like the experience. So yeah, I'm more of a glamping kind of person.
Yeah, I hear that. So did that play a major role in your talk to us about Williams, just in terms of like the rigor and the actual experience of it? Did any of the diversity stuff play a major role in your experience there? Was it not a big deal? What was daily life like at Williams?
Yeah, so culture shock and also academic shock, if that's a thing.
I think absolutely the rigor of the schools can be challenging. So many people having that moment of breakdown. I want to go home.
Yeah,
I want my mommy.
So most of my classmates came from either private high schools or public high schools in different states that are not New York City. So all the other New York City people were from private schools or specialized high schools. So while Randolph was a great school to get your education from, like high school education from, Randolph is also not as rigorous as any of these other high schools that people were coming from. So just competition wise, my academics were just not up to par when I first started. I had never had to struggle this much to understand materials. I was just used to everything either clicking automatically or I'd think on it for a bit and it would click. And that was not happening my first semester. It was very difficult. So I did have that moment of, oh my God, what am I doing here? Do I belong here? You know, imposter syndrome kicked in real hard first semester.
And how did you get through it?
Yeah, so I ended up joining. So twofold. So the first one was just conversations with my sisters or just friends from high school, again, still relying on that support system, about realizing that my shortcomings in college weren't because, you know, I wasn't up to par or anything. It was because I was starting at a disadvantaged viewpoint than everyone else was. So I had to keep that in mind, like, okay, you can do this. You know, maybe you weren't as prepared as everyone else coming in, but you have the tools. You work hard, you know, you ask questions, you can eventually catch up and excel. And then sophomore year, I also joined the rugby team at Williams. And that's where I found my people, as I like to call them. So I still have my friends from rugby. We're still really good friends now. We have group chats on every social media platform.
I am trying to imagine you playing rugby, and that is a picture.
Yeah, it was the best part about Williams. And I really found my people. And I think, again, in the first semester, I was just like, okay, I'm just going to be all about school now, trying to get everything pinpoint, but that wasn't working for me. So I kind of went back to basics, have something that separates academics from your regular life. So for me, that ended up being rugby.
Yeah, I find even now getting that balance between physical, social, mental challenge, you know, throughout the day.
Yeah,
it's so key. And I think that's amazing that you found that in your college experience, like knowing that you got to have these different things going on or else you're just not happy.
Yeah, because for me, it also worked as like a self-check, because I knew I had practice every day from 4 to 6. Like 2 hours of my day were taken up by rugby. A little more than 2 hours because right after is dinner time, right? So roughly 3 hours a day was taken up by rugby. So I had to make sure, you know, I got my readings done, I got my homework done, problem sets, papers. I went to office hours, scheduled office hours on times that worked for me. So just being on top of everything. And sophomore year, that's when I felt like I can compete with these students.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And that's awesome that you're like by sophomore year, because I know I think wouldn't be an uncommon thing for Randolph students, especially attending sort of some of these elite liberal arts schools. It's a challenge to catch up. Like you said, kids coming from specialized schools, tutors, just, you know, coming from economic backgrounds where any resource they needed was provided, and now you're competing with them, you know, in the seat next to you, and you don't have all that, and just trying to play catch up and getting that confidence and know that you deserve that spot, right? So it's amazing. I love that piece of your story. So talk to us about what's going on now as you're making your way through. You're coming into your own sophomore year. You're playing rugby already. Is that already going on? So you're playing rugby. I'm still trying to. Rugby is not a sport that I watch or pay attention to. I just know that it's like a more physical form of football, and I'm just trying to imagine it.
It's real fun. You should catch a match sometimes. It's real fun.
All right, so you're gonna have to watch with me and walk me through it, because I have no idea. The only thing I know big about rugby at all is that there's a team called All Blacks that does the haka in New Zealand. That's what I think that's about my limits of rugby knowledge.
Great team.
Yeah. So that's what I know, and that's about it. So you got to help me the rest of the way. So talk to us about the rest of your Williams experience, and kind of get us up to what's going on as you're getting into junior and senior year.
Yeah, so after sophomore year and like throughout sophomore year, I felt like I was, past that stage of surviving at Williams and just thriving at Williams. My grades were actually matching the effort I put in and what I was capable of doing. I got to work with some professors as research assistant. So that was cool just to get to see, I guess the topic from their point of view as opposed to just being a student doing readings. Still doing rugby, and I declared as an econ major my freshman year, and then I added a psychology major on top of it during my sophomore spring. I ended up taking Psych 101, really liked it, and wanted to look into social psychology some more, so I added that major on.
Yeah, what was the big influencer behind that? Because that's now you're making some big decisions about what you want to do and sort of your aim and focus, right?
Yeah. So at that time, so by end of freshman year, I had dropped the pre-med track. Well, we didn't have to declare a track, but I wasn't interested in pre-med anymore. I took enough chemistry to know that that was not for me anymore.
So chemistry chased you away.
Yeah, chemistry did me in. Redirected me to something that was more my speed, is how I like to think of it. But yeah, chemistry. So yeah, I was still interested in economics, and then after taking social psychology, I found out about this field called behavioral economics, where you just run studies about, well, not just run studies, but at that time, what I had learned about it was that you run studies about how people behave, because economics assumes that people are rational, and then psychology tells you people aren't. So that field kind of combines these two. And there's so many career opportunities you can go into. So I was like, okay, that's interesting. I like the topic regardless, and I could see myself in the behavioral economics sphere. So that's why I ended up adding that major on.
Now, it's such an interesting field. Was there something particular about your past or what was going on in the world that said, this is something, I want to understand how people are behaving, and was there something that was drawing that? Was there a problem in the world that you wanted to solve that drew you into that?
Yeah, so in my social psychology class, we did a lot of we looked at a lot of studies having to do with race and people's biases, and all of that. And I think it was at that time too that it was being broadcasted on every national television channel about, what was going on in the real world outside of the Williams bubble. So Trayvon Martin was getting to be around that time. So all of that was happening, protests, unlawful killings of Black people. So I think obviously there was some, I guess, influence with what was happening in the real world to focus, where I wanted to go with my studies.
And what was that? How many years ago was that? That was
6 years, around 6-7 years ago, and that's still happening.
Yeah, no, and I think that's, we're all, I think, growing impatient, and for good reason. This is stuff that has been going on and going on and going on, and although it's a lot more present and visible, everybody's got a cell phone camera now that can capture what's going on. Thank goodness, because otherwise, it's still in the shadows. It's still going on. It's still prevalent, and nothing's being done about it. So now it's cool to see that something's been done about it. I don't have all the details, but I know that one of the officers involved in Breonna Taylor's death is actually being charged today, which is like, we've heard story after story. It goes to the grand jury, and then there's no actual formal action taken towards the police officers. They were rightfully scared, so that was why the person had to die, that sort of thing. And today we're seeing a little bit of a change in that narrative. We'll see what it all plays out into. This is something that shouldn't have happened. somebody going into your apartment without knocking, shooting you, and, you know, it didn't even immediately become something that, you know, people were looking at. It had to pop up later, and then people's voices all over the nation have to be raised for there actually to be formal action taken, which is just a denial of justice. So
Yeah.
I imagine that plays into current day, Leigh, what's going on with you now. But how do we get from Williams psychology, behavioral economics to where you are now? So walk us through these past 6-7 years.
Yeah. So not sophomore year, senior year. Senior year, the economics major and I guess outcome that I was thinking of doing kind of, you know, lessened a bit, and I started to look more into the legal field. Again, everything that was happening around that time, even more Black lives were, you know, being killed at the hands of the police. So again, that definitely influenced. And my older sister actually was working at a law firm, intending to go on to law school. So I'm sure that played a role too, hearing her talk about the different things she wanted out of law school. But I wasn't fully sure, so I decided to take a few years off between undergrad and whatever, you know, law school, if I had decided to do that by then, just to solidify my decision, you know, because it's a timely endeavor, but also a costly endeavor.
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure that, you know, this was something that I really wanted to do. I ended up working at the mayor's office as a community educator in domestic violence. That's something that, you know, I've always been interested in, or being an advocate of survivors, and seeing that position, I thought I could get some, you know, do some actual helping for people, but also get, you know, direct client interactions with you get a lot of the time as an attorney. So I did that for.
How did you get hooked into the mayor's office?
Yeah, so I had just graduated and I was just looking for jobs back home. And I ended up on a posting for that job. That's literally how I found it. I wasn't going into it looking to be in that position, but I was just applying to things I was interested in doing and could see myself doing. So a lot of the other jobs I was interested in were mostly research positions, and I figured my resume had enough research on it. Maybe it's time I get out of the classroom or the lab and do some hands-on work.
This is where it starts coming in nice, having the, you know, the elite school on the resume and some of those pieces to play in the puzzle. What, you know, once you were in that position or role, what were some of the things that you were exposed to? I mean, I imagine being in the mayor's office is sort of a unique spot in the world. NYC is one of those cities. We were talking about it before we went live. Just, you know, once you've grown up or been in New York City for any amount of time, it's a whole different beast. It's a world literally unto itself. So, what were you exposed to in the mayor's office?
Yeah, so I did a lot of public speaking. That was my position, was to talk about domestic violence, specifically domestic violence amongst young people, which is a thing that doesn't get talked about a lot. So I did a lot of workshops for young people at schools, after school programs, but also to parents, teachers, and other staff, letting them know, you know, the different signs to look out for in young people. So that was like 80% of my job position. And the other, I just took up different committees. I was on a racial justice subcommittee, on incarcerated youth committee. So just different things I was interested in. And that just more shaped, you know, my beeline to law school. A lot of bureaucracy and a lot of like policy making issues, as in we on the ground knew there was a need for XYZ, but policymakers in Albany weren't listening or didn't care. Yeah, so
you were able to see that firsthand. In terms of your interest in speaking on domestic violence, is this something that was like anything that you had personal experience with, or was this just all with, you know, dealing with case studies and dealing with you know, the history and understanding what was going on out in the world?
Yeah, it was more of the latter, not something I had personal experience with. I knew friends and knew people that had experiences even as young people. So I knew that it existed, unlike a lot of people who just think it doesn't exist. I knew that it existed. It was prevalent. It was an issue that we need to address as a country, as a city. So that's where it kind of came in.
So I like that, and I appreciate that, because I think a lot of people, especially if they get passionate about something, it's difficult. All right, I'm going to go out and speak on domestic violence, and I think there's a little bit of a priority to emphasize somebody that's experienced, somebody that's lived through it, and for you to go out and to work on an issue and have the courage to publicly speak on an issue that you hadn't personally experienced, I think is important, because as we advocate and we become leaders for our community, we can't, you have to come from a place of like empathy and understanding, and our politicians, and I know that when I was talking, that's something that you may be getting interested in. I think I value that in somebody that's going to come out and represent my needs. It's great that you've experienced something, but if you have empathy and you're able to delve into somebody else's experience and truly understand where they're coming from, that's something that I value when I'm talking with a colleague or a partner, and it's definitely something that I want to see in my representative, my lawyer, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and I think it's important to center survivors' voices, of course, and I think people like me, allies, can also, just shout that same message, amplify the message that we're hearing from survivors. So that's the thing that I made sure to keep in mind in my role. Like whatever I was reading on paper, someone had lived, right? So if there was any inconsistencies, I'd listen to the survivor, because you've been through this.
Yes.
So I'm not going to deny anyone's experiences.
Yeah, I think, sometimes you just got to get out of the way of, I think I hear what you're saying in terms of, especially for me, because I work in a community that looks a lot different than I do, not speaking instead of or on behalf of, but in support of, is a big deal, right? I've been through some stuff in my life, and I can certainly speak from experience, but you sort of step out of the way when your experience doesn't meet what somebody else is going through, and letting that voice come through. I think that's a big deal for leadership, and something that, for young people, they need to sort of understand that as they're moving forward, because you can see that, especially for young speakers that are like feeling themselves, they can sort of do that, right? They can sort of get into that headspace of like, I'm going to speak for you rather than with you and in support of you, right?
Yeah.
That's a big deal. All right, so keep us going here. So you're getting to getting this experience at the NYC mayor's office. What was next?
Yeah, so the issues I had mentioned before about, policymakers in Albany and basically the people with the power. So that type of issue just, again, solidified my decision to go to law school. And I did a lot of research about, what types of school to apply to, financial aid, all of that consideration. We think about college, but with the added stress of, not stress, but added thought about, being able to find a job, because, we're not sure if I'm going to graduate in a recession or not. So, yeah, so I ended up, trying to apply to the best law schools that I could possibly get into.
Did you already have debt from undergrad?
So Quesbridge pays for everything for undergrad, so I had like minimal debt. No,
I dropped below into the comments this, and I'll make sure I go back and update as I post this on different stuff. That's something that people can apply to, because that's an amazing program and an important part of the story, which is why I want to ask that question, because you're going into law school with, so you had no debt, not from lodging, not from anything?
Yeah, so I had some debt from lodging, but that was basically a choice on my end. But
that all plays into because you can't, I think the naive thing, especially for students, like, I got this college aid package and they're going to pay for 100% of tuition. What about board? What about, what about some of the other things? What about food? Some of that kind of stuff. So that all plays a role into it. So you had a little bit of that. So you're going into law school, which is, I imagine, I don't know if you've got more scholarship opportunity there, but I imagine it's somewhat costly.
Yeah, it is a very costly process, which is a whole other conversation. But yeah, so I did get some scholarships to go to law school. So kind of like college, there's this test called the LSAT that you have to take, and basics of it, and I'm simplifying this a lot, is the higher you score, the better chances of getting money from these schools. And obviously they take into account, at least the schools I applied to took into account financial need and all of that. So some of my law school education is being funded by the school through scholarship, and some of it is being funded through loans that I've taken out. But yeah, very costly process.
So when you made the decision to go to law school, and I know you said you were interested in public policy, possibly getting into politics, what is the sort of financial plan around the debt and how you're going to mitigate that coming out of law school?
Yeah, so unfortunately, all the positions I'm really, really interested in for like a long-term career in don't pay that much starting out of law school. And that's just a fact of the legal field. There's like a bimodal curve to the salaries coming out of law school, depending on whether you do public interest or government, or if you want to go into a private firm. So to pay off my debts from law school, the plan is to go into a private firm for a couple of years, get experience, do some interesting work, and then transition out to government work once I can financially afford to do so.
Okay, I got you. All right, so we'll get a little bit more into like who you need to be connected with at the end of this, but we already know we need to connect you with some folks that have some opportunities at some private law firms that can help pay back that law school tuition. Yeah. So you got a little bit of funding to attend UPenn Law, right? Mm-hmm. What has that experience been like in terms of getting in and getting used to life in Pennsylvania? So you went from Massachusetts back to the city and then moved to Pennsylvania.
Yeah, to Philadelphia.
Yeah.
So I'll say this and add some caveats, but I'm really liking law school so far. My first year, I know for a lot of people, first year can be super tough, and it was definitely academically rigorous, a lot of reading, like I said. But again, I was confident in my choice of choosing Penn Law. It has a great community, and then the Black Law Students Association, or just BLSA as we call it, is just a really good community of people. Provided a lot of support coming in, either academic support or just support in general. So yeah, that was the thing that I was very happy about. Yeah, wait, what else did you say?
No,
oh yeah, Philadelphia, right?
So yeah, I mean, getting used to like the change in location. You can talk to me about what Philadelphia is like, but I mean, the fact that you're the president of the Black Law Students Association, like, I mean, you're in your second year. Is that common for somebody in their second year to be the president of the Black Law Students Association?
Yeah, so I'll go Philly first. Obviously, being in Philadelphia is much more different than being in Williamstown. Like, Philadelphia is a city. It's diverse. I see Black people everywhere I go. So that's nice. It's not Brooklyn, it's not New York, but it's pretty close. It's not even that far. So I've done day trips back home to see my family sometimes. Yeah, so Philly's great. It hadn't been a culture shock. The only culture shock, I guess, is living in my own apartment, and not, being with my mom and my sisters all the time. So that's the only one.
When you were living on campus in Massachusetts, were you always with a roommate?
So I had a roommate for 3 semesters, so freshman year and half of sophomore year. I had to move housing sophomore year because I tore my ACL and they did new housing. So I ended up in a solo dorm, and I had a solo.
Did you tear your ACL playing rugby?
Yes.
Oh, so are you healed? Like, are you able to play more?
Yeah, I got reconstruction surgery like middle of sophomore year and was able to go back to rugby beginning of junior year.
That's amazing.
Hence rehab, but it was done. So
That's
yeah. And for balsa, it depends. It depends on the chapter, like the law school that it's out of. But for ours, usually the board positions go to second year students, sometimes third year students, but third year students are usually checked out because they have to study for the bar and they're excited to be out. They don't want to deal with this a lot of the time. So yeah, it's not uncommon. And again, one of the reasons I chose Penn was because of Penn in general, but more specifically because of the balsa. So that made a big impact on where I ended up for law school, and I wanted to be able to, have a hand in the leadership in the organization to, keep it the same way it was and also improve on certain things for future Black students looking at Penn Law.
It's amazing. And then you're doing that as well as associate editor for the law review at University of Penn. So talk to us about that experience and how are you balancing all of this stuff, right? Because I know the studies, you said first year was tough. How are you balancing that in as you're getting prepared to do this damn thing with your law school degree here?
Yeah, so unfortunately, you don't get more hours in the day. You just got to learn how to be more effective in the limited hours that you have. And I think that's what the first 3 weeks or a month of my second year has taught me, is just that work is due and it will have to get done by the due date. So, less time on Instagram, less time watching my shows. I love watching shows, but I have to cut that back so I can do all of that. And associate editor of Law Review has been a great opportunity to be on a journal at a law school. That's one of the, hallmarks of law school education, to do a clinic, but also be on a journal where you get to, so the journal accepts publication from authors around the world, and associate editors like me go through and make sure, citations are correct, and basically edit the article so that we can publish it in our issues later on throughout the year. So that's been a pretty good learning experience.
And I love how you say every law student does this stuff, but that's not the case.
Yeah, I shouldn't say every law student, but a lot of law students.
The good law students. All right, I got you.
Yeah, and it depends on your interest as well. So I have friends so there's a competition to sit on the journal. So I have friends who opted not to do the competition just because being on a journal, then it go into, their lifelong plan. Maybe they're really interested in corporate stuff as opposed to litigation, where you need to be tip top in your writing, in your citing, and all of that. So with what I have in mind for where I want to go, being on a journal is really beneficial. And that's one of the reasons I ended up joining. But yeah, I shouldn't say all law students.
I love that. Well, because you're super humble. We were having this conversation before we got on, this is basic. There's nothing basic about this story. This is pretty awesome stuff. So I'm very excited talking to you about it. I think that it's an amazing resume that you put together, and I'm very excited about the future for you. So let's talk about that. What do you think the future holds for you? And then we'll kind of get into how people can reach out to you. I know LinkedIn, and I know I dropped that in the information below on YouTube, and on Facebook it'll be over to the side, but folks can definitely check you out there. But what does the future hold for Lei, and what are you trying to get into, and who do you want to be connected with?
Yeah, so future is graduating from law school, passing the New York bar, and starting to work at a big law firm in New York. I'm interested in litigation, specifically white collar and government enforcement and antitrust matters. So that's where I'm probably going to be for the next 5 or so years. And I'm also interested in clerking for a judge, hence the journal that I talked about before. So hopefully I get an opportunity to do that. And I think that's when I'll set up my entrance into government work and, perhaps public policy and politics that we talked about. So that's my plan. And definitely to anyone watching now or later, add me on LinkedIn, message me on LinkedIn. And if you're interested about any of the things I've done before or I'm interested in doing, message me, give me advice or ask for advice. I'm here for it all.
That's awesome. And I know we talked about before we jumped on that you are approachable. So you will not bite if people reach out to you on LinkedIn or any other social media.
Especially if we have a connection before, like you're coming from Randolph, you did XYZ, you're from Brooklyn, whatever it is.
That's awesome. What are some things people can reach out to you? I know there's some opportunities other than folks that are a private law firm. Who are folks that you're trying to connect with? People that you would love to speak to if you had the opportunity. Who is somebody that you would just relish the opportunity to connect with and speak with?
Yeah, so I think anyone in the government sphere, the public policy sphere, and politics at the local level, I think would be really interesting. Because I think a lot of times when we think about politics, we think, senators, we think presidents, but there's something to be said about the work that's being done at the local level in our boroughs. So if anyone has any experience in any of these fields, I'd love to, pick their brain, talk to them a little bit about how they got there, how is it, and all that stuff.
That's amazing. All right, so I'm going to leave it at that. I'm going to let you say goodbye to everybody. Thanks so much for doing this for me, Lei. I am so excited about what the future has to bring for you. I'm so excited about what you're doing right now. And I'm really happy that you got on here and shared your history. I know that people can benefit from hearing your story and learn from your success and some of the different things that you've gone through. I think that brings a lot of value to people. So thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, and thank you so much for having me. Actually going through like the history and all the way back to middle school, I don't know, it was kind of nice. I hadn't thought about any of these, different things I did in high school, any of that. So it was really nice. And thank you to everyone watching. And again, just message me on LinkedIn, add me on LinkedIn if you're interested in anything else.
All right, we're going to get into my Alumni Connections theme song once again. So you got to check out.
This is the
I know I was talking to Lei.
Project.
You can look at more interviews on YouTube. We actually have an SBI channel. This will be posted on
Randolph campus high school. But this is not a test. You should say it with your chest.
Hang out for me, Lei. I'll talk to you in a moment.
You are proud. Support it then. Stronger together through unity. Better together. Let's build the community. Randolph isn't a school or a building. It's a legacy. It's not in your past. It's your identity. So show some pride. Alumni Connections is sponsored and brought to you by SBI, CCPI, SoundDownBusiness.org, SoundDownBusiness.org. The journey doesn't end with graduation and prom. The journey doesn't end with graduation and prom. The journey doesn't end with the journey doesn't end. This is the Alumni Connections Project. This is the Alumni Connections Project. 8th Philip Randolph, 8th Philip Randolph, Randolph.